In the blood-soaked pages of Old West history, certain names echo with the ring of legend: Wild Bill, Doc Holliday, Billy the Kid. But some outlaws, like Barney Riggs, remain lurking in the shadows, no less dangerous, no less fascinating. Riggs wasn't just another gunslinger riding the dusty trails of West Texas. He was a man marked by violence, vengeance, and a knack for surviving against all odds. From deadly shootouts to courtroom drama, his story is one of betrayal, bullets, and bare-knuckle justice. If you're into untold stories and forgotten legends of the Wild West, hit that subscribe button and saddle up. There's a lot more where this came from. Barney Kemp Riggs gained a reputation as a well-known and controversial figure in the turbulent era of the American Old West. Born on December 18, 1856 in Arkansas, he was the second of 7 children raised by Thomas and Hannah Felton Riggs. Not long after his birth, the family relocated to Texas, where their name would eventually become associated with a long and complicated legacy. Barney's early years were shaped by a rough frontier environment, and over time, both he and several members of his family became entangled in a pattern of confrontations and legal troubles that would follow them for generations. His involvement in a fatal incident at the age of 18 marked the beginning of a long and controversial path. In Salado, Texas, he was reportedly involved in an accidental shooting that resulted in the death of his friend, Hugh Armstrong. While some accounts suggest it was unintended, the event raised early questions about Riggs's character and future. By 1879, when local authorities sought to question him further, Riggs chose to leave Texas. He resurfaced in Arizona territory, specifically in Cochise County, where 2 of his uncles had already established themselves. He found work on his Uncle Jim Riggs's ranch, adapting to life as a cowboy in the rugged landscape of the Southwest. During his time in Arizona, Riggs met and married Vennie Hicklin, a young woman from Dos Cabezas. The couple wed on February 21, 1882. Around this period, historical sources suggest Riggs may have become involved in a series of cross-border thefts, particularly involving livestock, which were common crimes in the Arizona-Mexico border region at the time. One troubling account places Riggs at the center of a deadly dispute at a watering hole, where tensions escalated between his group and several Mexican nationals. Historical reports claim that multiple individuals lost their lives as a result of the altercation. Although exact details remain murky, the incident further cemented Riggs's reputation as a man deeply intertwined with the lawless aspects of frontier life. While the full truth of Barney Riggs's actions may be clouded by legend and conflicting accounts, his story reflects the harsh realities and complex moral landscape of the Old West, where justice was often inconsistent and survival sometimes blurred the lines between right and wrong. Despite his alleged involvement in criminal activity, or perhaps because of his connections and reputation, Barney Riggs found himself aligned with official law enforcement efforts during a turbulent period in Arizona's history. When Cochise County Sheriff Johnny Bayon, whose integrity was widely questioned even in his time, assembled a posse to pursue the Earp brothers during their controversial vendetta ride, Riggs was among those deputized. This brief affiliation with the law came at a time when the lines between outlaw and lawman were often blurred. Later, Riggs became entangled in a deeply personal and highly publicized conflict involving his own family. The tensions centered on Richmond Hudson, the stepson of Riggs's Uncle Jim, and a man who also served as Barney's supervisor at the family ranch. When Riggs returned from a cattle buying trip to Texas in the fall of 1886, he was met with troubling rumors that his wife, Vennie, may have been romantically involved with Hudson. Initially, Riggs confronted Hudson, who firmly denied the claims. Riggs chose not to escalate the situation. However, within days, witnesses claimed that Hudson had begun to boast about the alleged affair. On September 29, 1886, Hudson was fatally shot by an unknown assailant. Although there were no eyewitnesses to the act, the ongoing dispute between Hudson and Riggs was no secret, and suspicion quickly focused on Barney. A $250 reward was offered for his apprehension, substantial for the time, and Riggs fled into the surrounding mountains. In response, Tombstone lawman Fred Dodge partnered with Deputy Sheriff Charlie Smith to pursue the case. They initiated a quiet surveillance operation near the Riggs ranch. Eventually, they observed a rider using hand signals to communicate with Barney Riggs, which led to the arrest of both Barney and his wife. While Barney was released shortly thereafter, Barney was held in custody to stand trial for Hudson's death. The first trial commenced on November 11, 1886. The jury, however, was divided. Some jurors reportedly believed that retaliating against someone perceived to have disrespected a man's wife could be morally, if not legally, defensible. As a result, no verdict was reached, and the trial ended in a mistrial. A second trial was convened in December. This time, the court placed greater emphasis on the calculated nature of the act and the use of concealment rather than confrontation. On December 31, 1886, Barney Riggs was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment at the Arizona Territorial Prison, located in Yuma. In October 1887, Barney Riggs's fate took a surprising turn while he was serving his life sentence at the Arizona Territorial Prison in Yuma. During an attempted prison break, 7 inmates launched a coordinated effort to escape, managing to arm themselves, likely through smuggled weapons or a lapse in security. The situation quickly turned chaotic. As the prison gates were secured to prevent the escape, the warden, Thomas Gates, was seized by one of the inmates and used as a human shield. Amid the turmoil, Riggs made a decisive move. He reportedly took control of a weapon from one of the escapees and intervened, stopping the convict who had endangered Warden Gates. His quick and courageous actions helped bring the situation under control and ensure the safety of the prison leadership. This moment of bravery significantly changed Riggs's trajectory. In recognition of his actions, he was granted a pardon and released from prison on December 31, 1887, exactly 1 year after his original conviction. After his release, Riggs traveled to California to reunite with his wife, Vennie, and their son, William Earl Riggs. Unfortunately, the time and distance appeared to have strained their relationship beyond repair. Before long, Barney left California, taking his son with him and returning to Texas, where he settled once again. Back in Texas, Riggs began working alongside his younger brother, Tom. Together, they operated a ranch located approximately 30 miles west of the Texas frontier, continuing the family's long-standing association with ranching and the cattle trade. In the spring of 1889, the Albuquerque Citizen reported that Riggs had been detained in connection with the death of a cowboy. However, Riggs denied any involvement, and there is no formal record of his arrest or imprisonment in relation to this claim. It's unclear whether the report was based on rumor or a mistaken identity, but no charges appear to have been filed. Though there is no legal documentation confirming that Riggs formally divorced his first wife, he remarried on September 23, 1891. His second wife was Annie Stella Fraser Johnson, the divorced spouse of former Pecos County Sheriff James Johnson and the sister of George A. Bud Fraser, who served as sheriff of Reeves County. Together, Barney and Annie had 4 children. Despite establishing a new family, their marriage was marked by considerable difficulties, reflecting the complex and often unstable personal life that seemed to follow Riggs long after his days in the Old West's most volatile corners. In 1891, Barney Riggs found himself in the middle of yet another turbulent chapter of Old West law enforcement. That year, his brother-in-law, Sheriff George A. Bud Fraser of Reeves County, made a controversial decision by appointing James Jim Miller as one of his deputies. Miller had a reputation that made many uneasy, and soon after his hiring, reports of cattle rustling and horse theft noticeably increased along the Pecos Valley. Riggs raised concerns directly with Fraser, suggesting that Miller might not be above suspicion. Still, with no direct evidence linking Miller to any wrongdoing, Fraser chose to keep him in the position. The turning point came when a Mexican prisoner was fatally shot while reportedly trying to flee custody. The incident prompted Fraser to launch an internal investigation. Riggs alleged that Miller had silenced the prisoner to prevent him from revealing the location of a pair of stolen mules. Acting on that lead, Fraser eventually recovered the missing animals and dismissed Miller from his post. This marked the beginning of a long-standing and dangerous feud between Bud Fraser and Jim Miller, one that would simmer for years. By 1892, a new figure entered the scene, Andrew Jackson A.J. Royal, who was elected sheriff of Pecos County. Royal, known for his polarizing leadership style, soon appointed Riggs as one of his deputies. Royal was a divisive figure from the outset. Some locals viewed him as a firm hand trying to bring order to a lawless region. Others believed he frequently overstepped his authority and used intimidation against those who opposed him. During Royal's 2-year term, his behavior reportedly became more confrontational. Allegations of physical confrontations and coercion began to surface. It remains unclear whether Riggs actively participated in these incidents, but given his close association with Royal, it's possible he was at least indirectly involved. When the next election approached in 1894, political tensions reached a breaking point. The situation grew so intense that Texas Rangers were called in to maintain peace during the campaign. In October of that year, Royal and 3 of his deputies, Barney Riggs, Camilo Terrazas, and John P. Meadows, were arrested by the Rangers. They were accused of working together to facilitate the escape of a jailed Mexican national named Victor Ochoa. Royal was defeated in the election later that same month. In November 1894, he was fatally attacked under circumstances that remain historically controversial, bringing his turbulent career, and perhaps the feud it fueled, to an abrupt end. While serving as a deputy in Pecos County, Barney Riggs was known to overlook certain offenses, likely influenced by personal ties and local loyalties. However, such leniency was not extended across the county line into neighboring Reeves County, even though the sheriff there was his own brother-in-law, Bud Fraser. Despite these family connections, Riggs found himself in legal trouble multiple times. He was arrested on several occasions for public intoxication, carrying a firearm without proper authorization, and involvement in physical altercations. In March 1893, a more serious charge emerged when he was indicted in Reeves County for allegedly attempting to harm a man named Agustin Polanco. According to Polanco's testimony, he had gone to the Riggs ranch in search of a missing burro when Riggs confronted him, discharged a weapon, and struck him. The case eventually went to trial, but Riggs was acquitted, likely due to insufficient evidence or conflicting accounts. Remarkably, just 4 days after the indictment, Riggs was arrested again, this time by Sheriff Bud Fraser himself, for unlawfully carrying a firearm. The case initially came before County Judge George M. Fraser, who was not only Bud's father, but also Riggs' father-in-law. Recognizing the clear conflict of interest, the proceedings were moved to a different jurisdiction, and the charges were later dropped. That same year, tension between Bud Fraser and Jim Miller continued to escalate. The two would engage in armed confrontations in both April and December of 1894. While both survived these encounters, the feud would simmer on. After failing to win re-election in 1894, Fraser relocated to Carlsbad, New Mexico, where he started a livery business and stepped back from law enforcement. Yet the lingering animosity surrounding the Fraser-Miller conflict would soon affect Riggs again. In early 1896, 2 associates of Jim Miller, John Denson and Bill Earhart, were overheard in Fort Stockton speaking threats against Riggs. The 2 soon departed for Pecos, Texas, seemingly in search of a confrontation. Fortunately, U.S. Deputy Marshal D. Harkey sent a telegram warning Riggs, who took care to avoid the men upon their arrival. However, on March 3, 1896, while Riggs was temporarily working behind the bar at R.S. Johnson's saloon for a friend, the situation escalated. Denson and Earhart entered the establishment while Riggs was alone. A shot fired by Earhart grazed Riggs, who responded quickly. In the struggle that followed, Earhart was fatally wounded. Riggs then engaged with Denson, who managed to flee. Riggs pursued him outside and, according to court records, stopped him as he attempted to escape. Riggs turned himself in and was later tried for murder. The jury found him not guilty, likely viewing the incident as an act of self-defense amid a well-known regional feud. Later that year, tragedy struck even closer to home. On September 14th, 1896, while visiting his family in Toyah, Texas, Bud Fraser was fatally attacked by Jim Miller, bringing their long-standing conflict to a deadly conclusion. In the years that followed, Barney Riggs continued to struggle with alcohol-related behavior and confrontational incidents. These ongoing issues eventually led his wife, Annie, to separate from him. After leaving the marriage, Annie took over operations at the Kohler Hotel in Fort Stockton, Texas, demonstrating both independence and resilience. During their time apart, Riggs frequently caused disturbances, particularly when under the influence. He reportedly directed many of his disruptive outbursts at Annie, prompting her to seek legal recourse. In March 1901, she was granted a divorce. As part of the settlement, Riggs was required to provide regular financial support for their children. To ensure accountability, Daniel J. Buck Chadbourne, husband of Annie's daughter from a previous marriage, was appointed trustee to manage these payments. This arrangement deeply irritated Riggs, who made no effort to hide his resentment. He often spoke harshly to Chadbourne in public, displaying open hostility. By the following year, Chadbourne had become so uncomfortable with the situation that he formally requested to be released from his role as trustee. Riggs, still holding on to his frustrations, confronted him in April 1902 and struck him with a cane. The next day, the two men encountered each other again. According to witnesses, Riggs approached Chadbourne once more with his cane in hand and behaved in a manner that Chadbourne perceived as threatening. In response, Chadbourne drew a firearm and shot Riggs in the chest. Riggs was taken to the Kohler Hotel for care, but his injuries proved fatal. He passed away the next day. He was later laid to rest in the Old Fort Cemetery in Fort Stockton, a burial ground he shares with his former associate, A. J. Royal. Chadbourne was indicted on a charge of second-degree murder and brought to trial in Brewster County in October 1903. After reviewing the circumstances of the case, the jury found him not guilty. He later moved to New Mexico, where he pursued a lengthy and reputable career in public service as both a deputy sheriff and a U.S. Customs agent. Annie Riggs, for her part, purchased the Kohler Hotel in 1904 and renamed it the Riggs Hotel. She successfully ran the business for many years until her death in May 1931. Today, the building serves as the Annie Riggs Memorial Museum, preserving her legacy in Fort Stockton. Meanwhile, R.S. Johnson's Saloon in Pecos, Texas, the location of Riggs's earlier confrontation with Jim Miller's associates, has also become a historic site. It now forms part of the West of the Pecos Museum. A plaque on the saloon floor marks the location of the deadly encounter with John Denson. As for Jim Miller, his controversial and lawless activities continued for several more years. Ultimately, in 1909, Miller met his end in Ada, Oklahoma, when a group of local residents, frustrated with the legal system's failure to convict him, took matters into their own hands and carried out a vigilante hanging. Barney Riggs lived fast, fought hard, and left behind a tangled legacy that still echoes through the dusty streets of West Texas. His story isn't just about gunfights and grudges. It's about the harsh choices and untamed spirit that define the Old West itself. If you enjoyed uncovering the turbulent life of Barney Riggs, there's plenty more where that came from. Hit that subscribe button and join us as we ride deeper into the legends, truths, and forgotten tales of the American frontier.